He kept sabotaging our install orders in the system. One binder of receipts flipped the room and forced HR to expose the scam. Hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell. Watch a hardware tyrant learn that receipts beat swagger. On paper, my job was simple. Build an installations program inside the biggest hardware chain in our county. Take chaos off the floor, and leave Saturdays to families who needed fences, cabinets, and light the color of daylight. The store smelled like lumber, hot dust, and popcorn salt from the rental kiosk. The air curtain thumped each time a cart pushed through. Devin, the assistant manager, wore a supervisor's badge like a crown and liked to stand too close. His breath carried energy drink and impatience. On day one he said, "You will send me every decision." I said, "I will send you every result." I opened a fresh binder, slid a manila divider labeled incidents, and tucked a printed schedule under the tab so paper could remember when the floor forgot. By week 2 our pipeline finally hummed. Follow-up calls flowed, quotes landed. Installers showed up in boots that did not track mud. Then the cancellations began to fall out of a clear sky with bland subject lines like, "Customer changed mind," and "Vendor delay." I tasted pennies, called 3 clients, and heard the same tired phrase, "Someone from the store told me to wait." I wrote each call in a pocket notebook, underlined the hours and words, and printed a small phone log so the pattern had a spine. The popcorn machine popped. A forklift beeped. A child squealed at the giant inflatable drill by the entrance. I slid the phone log behind incidents and told myself the truth would sit still long enough to be measured, even if Devin kept moving the furniture in the dark. I printed the installer roster on bright stock and clipped it to a clipboard, then snapped a time-stamped photo of the display phone where missed calls pile into a gray list. A copy of that screenshot went under the tab with a sticky flag that read, "First crack." My pen left a deep groove under one line, "Receipts before speeches," and I let the groove steady my jaw while the air curtain thumped. I built my week around verbs, not speeches. Morning huddles smelled like sawdust and floor cleaner. We mapped calls, set expectations in plain words, and left a chocolate in the install queue for luck. Devin prowled with a clipboard and a manager voice that preferred performance to outcomes. "Copy me on everything," he said. "Copy you on results." I answered, and slid him a 1-page plan that drew 3 lanes. Discovery, quote, schedule. I taped a laminated checklist by the service desk printer. Acknowledge, book, confirm, and printed it again on heavy stock so the ink would not bleed. In the binder, a second tab read practice. Behind it, live templates, call scripts, and a small card that said repair before revenge. The first month our numbers climbed the way sunlight climbs a wall toward noon. Installers sent photos of clean work, happy clients wrote back, and our district manager forwarded a thank you email with a grin you could hear. I printed the email, highlighted the sentences that mattered, and slid it under practice with a date stamped small as a fingerprint. Then Devin inserted himself like a misplaced wrench. He rewrote the call script to make every answer travel through him, took the Q phone on his lunch break, and told me to stop, confusing the chain of command. The floor smelled like hot rubber and carton ink. The microwave popped. A printer juddered. I asked him, "Why slow a winning line?" He said, "Power is a safety feature." I said nothing, took a photo of the laminated checklist he had moved, and attached it to a short log that recorded each detour he forced into the pipe. When the chocolate went missing from the queue, we all laughed. But the laughter died when the first installer called to say a job had been reassigned by management, and the voice on the other end sounded like Devin wearing a fake mustache in a dark room. The first crack was not dramatic. It was a cold little click. A customer forwarded a voicemail that said, in a strained manager tone, "We advised delaying vendor issues. Yet our vendor had stock and a truck idling 2 suburbs away." I transcribed the voicemail, printed it on white paper that smelled like toner, and slid it behind incidents with a sticky tag labeled Artifact 1. "Who told you to wait?" I asked the customer. "A man who said he ran your store," she said, and the word ran scratched inside my ear. I pulled a day's worth of queue history and noticed a quiet pattern. Jobs went cold after Devin borrowed the phone, and the notes he typed looked like a shrug. The air curtain thumped. The forklift beeped in a tired rhythm. Someone dragged a pallet and the sound grated like a truth trying to stand. I walked to Devin's desk and said, "I need the Q phone left at the counter, not carried off." He smiled with all teeth. "Chain of command," he said. "Chain of custody," I answered, and set a small desk cradle by the printer with a label that read "Leave phone here." He moved the cradle to a shadow. I moved it back, took a picture, printed the picture, and attached it to a page titled Evidence of Interference. That night, I opened a fresh page in practice and wrote 3 verbs in block letters. Identify, establish, present, then added a 4th in smaller type. Off-ramp. I was not after theater. I wanted a room that could fix what one man's pride had bent. The store smelled like rain on concrete at closing, and the PA played a lullaby tone that made me think of trucks waiting for green lights. I printed a lane map with arrows, client to quote to install, and taped it above the service desk so eyes would land on flow. Then I photographed the map and filed it. When my pen dug a groove under the word present, I let the pressure slow my breath, because a steady hand would matter more than a loud one when doors opened. Escalation started with honest questions and ended with a scraped nerve. I asked vendor dispatch to confirm stock, and their reply landed like a wrench. Inventory ready, crew ready, no delays. I printed the email, circled the line that mattered, and filed it. Who keeps telling your clients to wait? The dispatcher asked. A man who likes the sound of his own echo, I said. Devin responded by tightening the leash. He changed the shared login on the service desk computer and announced a new rule. No calls without his approval. The room smelled like hot laminate and anxiety. The radio stuttered. A child cried near lighting. I wrote a quiet memo in plain words, copied the posted policy about member access, and slid both into incidents with a tab called Chain of Custody. Leave the Q phone at the desk, I told him again. He lifted the handset, smiled, and walked away. I followed, calm. You do not own the air between questions and answers, I said. You do not run this store, he said, chin high. I run my lane, I answered, and set the phone in the cradle. He moved it again. I kept the camera gentle and printed a strip of photos that told the story without adjectives. That night, a friend in receiving whispered that a hidden returns link lived on the corporate portal. Click the path and a job slid off our books like a plate off a wet table. Who has access? I asked. Assistant managers, he said, and the air in my chest cooled. I wrote the path on a sticky note, confirmed with an installer who had just been rescheduled, and saw the breadcrumbs sit lonely on the monitor frame. I printed a clean screenshot of the portal menu, boxed the word returns, and slid the page behind incidents. The forklift beeped in the empty bay, a sound that meant the building knew more than it could say out loud. And I finally understood what my off-ramp would have to offer if I wanted repair, not theater. The low point wore a mask that looked like relief. Our cancellations flattened for a week, and I let my guard slip. Then 3 in a row fell in a single afternoon, each with the same bland note about vendor delay. I felt heat rise behind my eyes and walked outside into air that smelled like hot asphalt and rain. A delivery truck idled. The driver checked his clipboard and shrugged at a job that should have been ours already. I returned to the desk, opened the portal, and watched the returns link blink like a small dare. I could have clicked it to make a point and turned my day into theater. Instead, I called my district manager and asked for a quiet meeting in a neutral room with Devin present, a calendar invite in plain type, and a recorder on the table so nobody's memory would wobble. I wrote an off-ramp in dull language. Leave scheduling to the install desk, keep the Q phone at the counter, restore shared login access, and put any policy change in writing with a date. In exchange, no write-ups, no speeches, just a path back to outcomes. I printed the offer and taped a small square at the bottom labeled Fair Choice, because dignity needs rails. Then I built a slim packet, the voicemail transcript, the vendor email, the portal screenshot, the phone cradle photo strip, and a timeline that spelled hours in words. We are going to fix this, I told Ray at closing. Or watch a crown fall off in public, he said. The PA chimed good night. The air curtain thumped. The clock on the far wall hummed. I slid the packet into the binder and let my fingers rest on the incidents tab until my pulse slowed enough to walk into tomorrow without spilling anything I could not justify. On the way out, I passed the inflatable drill, felt its vinyl skin cool under my palm, and whispered, "Repair before revenge," because the right room was waiting and the hinge on its door already sounded awake. The agenda I wrote was dull on purpose. Restore shared login access with a stamped changelog, park the Q phone in the cradle by the service desk with a daily signature, lock the hidden returns path behind a dual approval from installs and loss prevention, and put policy changes in writing with dates. I added an off-ramp that kept dignity in the room. Take credit for the fix, keep your schedule power in your own lane, and we shake hands with no write-ups and no speeches. Door first, I told Ray. Door first, he echoed. I printed a calendar invite for 2 in the afternoon, taped a tiny square on the margin labeled Fair Choice, and clipped the invite to a one-page offer so time could not pretend to be fog. The store smelled like hot cardboard and citrus cleaner. The air curtain thumped. Static clung to the laminated checklist by the printer. I stacked artifacts like wrenches in order: vendor email, voicemail transcript, portal screenshot, phone cradle photo strip, timeline with hours spelled in words, and slid them behind the incidents tab where paper grows a spine. You really want him in the room? The custodian asked, leaning on a broom. I want the right room, I said. At lunch, I walked the perimeter under buzzing lights and practiced the sentence that keeps fire out of my mouth. We are here for safety, not spectacle. When the district manager replied accepted and added a small line about bringing HR, the printer warmed my palm, the ink smelled sweet, and the clock over lighting hummed like a belt ready to slip or bite. I built the packet until it clicked like a well-set torque wrench. The index lived on page 1, then the summary, then a flow map that showed how a job should travel in 3 clean beats. Discover, quote, install. I printed vendor confirmations that smelled of warm toner, highlighted the lines that mattered, and taped a signature flag where a tired I would land. Carla ran a 10-minute huddle under the hum of the air curtain, teaching a tiny ritual: log calls, photograph the board when someone moves it, write dates and words, and Ray practiced the phrase, leave the Q phone here, calm and even. I laid out pens, a sign-in sheet for the meeting, and a small card that read repair before revenge, practice on the tab. My pocket recorder blinked a fat red eye. I slid spare batteries beside it. The room tasted like dust and coffee. The district manager texted that loss prevention would dial in. I printed the message and clipped it under the timeline, so the right ears were literally attached. I added one more page, a clean excerpt of the access policy that says who may change logins, and boxed the sentence in blue. Devin paced behind appliances with a paper cup and a grin that did not travel to his eyes. Nervous? He asked. Prepared, I said. The floor buffer whined in the next aisle. A child squealed near holiday lights. The sign-in sheet fluttered when the door side opened, and the district manager stepped in with a folder that smelled like rain. The conference room tasted like dry markers and burnt coffee. I set the recorder by the pitcher, slid the packet across, and spoke in verbs. Promise, breach, receipts, off-ramp, I said, tapping each section. Loss prevention's speaker crackled. We hear you. Devin smiled thin. This is harassment. I placed the voicemail transcript in front of the district manager, then the vendor email that said inventory ready, then the portal screenshot with returns boxed in ink. Why did jobs die when the Q phone left the counter? I asked. He lifted a shoulder. Chain of command. Chain of custody, I answered, and set the phone cradle photo strip where his hand could not miss it. The district manager's pen clicked once. Off-ramp? She asked. I slid the one-pager. Leave scheduling with installs, restore access with a stamped log, park the phone in the cradle, put changes in dated memos, and we end it here. Devin leaned back. I run this store. Loss prevention side through the speaker. We run the returns path, the voice said, mild. I added one more artifact, an audit request printed 5 minutes earlier, and wrote the case number in words on the margin. You can take the door, I said quietly, or we let the rails carry us. Fluorescence hummed. The vent breathed cool. The district manager waited. Devin pushed the offer back with a fingertip. No, he said, eyes on the ceiling. The recorder clicked louder than it needed to, and the district manager turned to the speaker and said, Run the login audit now. Consequences did not roar. They arrived like steady rain on a tin awning. IT returned a login audit that mapped edits in sober lines. Assistant manager credentials altered the service desk access on a Thursday before lunch, and the returns link traveled 3 times during the hour when 3 customers changed mind. I printed the audit, warm and faintly sweet from toner, and placed it beside the policy excerpt that boxed who may change what. Loss prevention spoke without heat. Dual approval on returns from now on. Path locked behind installs and LP. Changes logged with timestamps. Q phone docked at counter. Daily signature. HR slid a paper that read final written warning across to Devin and asked for initials. The page smelled like lemon cleaner. He kept his mouth in a smile that did not contain teeth. You cannot prove intent, he said. We can fix impact, the district manager answered. She signed an operations memo on the spot. Restore shared access, publish the checklist, require written policy for any change, and schedule a regional review next week. The Q phone cradle got a tamper-evident seal. The access log went live under practice with version numbers like little mileposts. The hidden returns breadcrumb vanished behind a gray wall guarded by audits and time. I wrote a short lesson on a sticky square, mirror the rule, not the man, and pressed it to my binder so my thumb would meet it first. After closing, the aisle air smelled like floor wax and cool dust. The inflatable drill sagged and then stood when the fan caught. the login dashboard refreshed with a new banner that read audit enabled, and one line on the audit still blinking asked for a second signature before morning. You could feel the room learning. The next morning, the Q phone rang and stayed at the counter. Carla answered on the first chime and booked 2 quotes before Devin finished opening his mouth. Vendors sent thumbs-up photos of trucks pointed toward driveways. Installers texted on site, followed by shots of clean work. The air curtain thumped like a metronome that had found a tempo. The district manager posted a simple policy one-sheet in the break room. Dual approvals, shared access, phone docked, changes posted, and I taped a copy under practice so hands would find it. HR moved Devin into receiving for a season with a line about focus and process. His badge chirped at a different door. The room smelled like pallet wrap and rubber bands. Sales did not spike like fireworks. They rose like morning. An email from a client read, "You called when you said, you showed when you said," and the last line glowed like a small lamp. I printed it and slid it under practice with a date stamp shy as a freckle. The portal's returns link now asked for 2 names and produced a log that read like a diary with no gossip, just time and consequence. I mailed the vendors a thank you with 1 paragraph in plain words. "We fixed flow, here is the checklist, here is the contact." The radio and lighting played something that sounded like a good afternoon. The forklift beeped in shorter sentences. The popcorn booth smelled like salt and butter instead of heat and dust. At closing, the district manager handed me a short note that said simply keep it boring, and the last line on the day's audit asked for 1 more signature that could not be forged by a pocket. Moral in 1 line. Pick verbs over villains, mirror process not ego, and let the right room read the receipts out loud. I am not proud of the anger that pressed my molars. I am proud we offered an off-ramp, kept the phone where calls meet answers, and locked a quiet exploit behind grown-up rails. Revenge by design is not a torch. It is a breaker you flip so a building cannot burn twice. If your workplace ever lets someone turn a crown into a lever, keep a tab called incidents and a tab called practice, write amounts and hours in words, dock the phone where hands can see it, and give 1 honest door before the audit walks in. What would you have done in my aisle, take the public showdown, or carry the packet into a room with a recorder and a clock? And where do you draw the line between empathy and boundaries when pride starts to tax outcomes? Tell me in the comments. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and ring the bell so you never miss the next story. And stay awesome while you build systems that outlast moods.